Alright, so this is How to Survive War, which is a collection of wiki pages. We'll be going over the Eve University Wartime Standard Operating Procedures, or WARSOP, the Wartime Checklist, some tips for war, and how to avoid losses to war targets. Over the past month or two, I've been watching the kill board, and I have seen a depressing number of industrial kills. So we will go over how to use industrials in wartime and safe ways for getting them out of danger. Also cover some other aspects of industry like mining, freighters, things like that, and what to do when you see war targets show up in local. So the first thing is the Wartime Standard Operating Procedures. This is a set of rules that you have to follow while you're in the uni. It also applies to non-uni members that are in any of the Ivy League corporations, such as our other linguistic groups or our Hall of Residence for alts. Everyone in Ivy has to follow these. So the first thing in the Wartime Standard Operating Procedures, and there's a link in lecture.e-uni for you. You can fly pretty much anything you want with a few exceptions. There is a handy little graph that shows exactly what kind of ships you can fly and what requirements there are for flying them. The uni now uses a strictly tiered format. Used to be there was a whole big old list of ships that you could fly and couldn't fly, and then we just simplified it into basic Tech 1, Tech 2, Tech 3, and so on. And then you just have to get freshman, sophomore, or graduate to be able to fly more types of ships during war. We did the same thing for modules and rigs. And as a note, while you can use Tech 2 rigs regardless of your title, it is really not recommended because Tech 2 rigs are incredibly expensive. Okay. So there are travel advisories, which we'll occasionally come across. What that is some of the directors or managers decide that there are some areas that we should avoid. We usually avoid them because war targets are extremely active in those areas. Or when some events happen, such as Burn Jita, we'll have a travel advisory for that. So they're not strictly war-related. And there's more details through a link in the WARSOP page. And before we go on to the tips for wartime, the last thing is, if you have a question about the WARSOP or any of its parts, you should contact the Student Guidance Department. That way you can get direct answers from the directors. That way you don't get misinformation or partial information or anything like that. You get it straight from the top. We also have a forum thread specifically for WARSOP questions, which is great. As for where travel advisories are shown to get a specific list, go to the Corporations window under Alliances and then Bulletins. There are some general travel advisories. Pretty much try to avoid trade hubs. That's the biggest one. If there is anything special, we'll usually have an announcement added to the message of the day for the Alliance, Corporation, or chat.e-uni in-game channels. I think Alliance is currently the preferred one for that, but I could be wrong. Alright, any questions about WARSOP? Like, why it's so short? Because when I first joined the uni, it was like 20 pages. And if you're curious about how it used to look, you can actually go into the history button on the wiki and view all the past revisions of any page. So you can see back when it was 20 pages. It's kind of nice.
Okay, why is it so short now?
It is short now because we did an experiment I think it was a couple years ago now. we had a no-SOP month. No war-SOP. So we went from a really restrictive war-SOP to no war-SOP at all for a month. During this time, the Uni declared war on about half a dozen people, and another dozen or so declared war on us. So we had a good 20 wars going all at the same time. Some of it was with Red versus Blue. Some of it was with Horrors in Space. We had a couple of other bigger corps. Pandemic Legion joined the fun. It was crazy. But after that, we revised our WarSOP and changed it to be less restrictive. The exact reasoning the managers and directors did that, I can't say, because I'm not a manager and I'm not a director. Part of it was also because of the updated war mechanics that Inferno brought us. So because of the changes and the fact that the old deck shield that we used to have, which forced the cost of wars to be 1 billion ISK every week, that went out of date with the new war deck mechanics. We can't do that anymore. And it basically changed how wars operated in HiSec. And for those wondering, a war is only a HiSec, sometimes low-sec thing. It has zero effect in null-sec because Concord already doesn't care if you shoot each other in null-sec. So declaring war is literally bribing the police to look the other way. Alright, on to the next section, which is the wartime checklist. So we still have time before this war starts. About 15 minutes or so, so if you want to do any of this, now is a great time. Good thing to do is always kind of go over our roles. If you're staying in the Uni during the war, you always have the option of leaving for the war. If you do drop out of the Uni for the war, you will be unable to rejoin for 1 full week. That's an in-game limitation that came with the Inferno war changes. So if the war that you left during is still active, it takes 7 days from the time you leave to rejoin. So always keep that in mind if you're considering it. When you want to leave for war, you first have to drop all of your roles, which removes all of your titles. Once you do that, you have 24 hours to wait, and then you can actually drop the corporation. And that's a corporation security measure that was put in, so people can't just use their roles to take everything out of a hangar and leave the corp the same day. And that's for all corporations. That's just a game mechanic. If you are staying in the Uni during the war, that's where the checklist comes in. Some common things are to try to pick a role that you want to fill in PvP fleets, because we tend to have a lot of those during wars, either going out to hunt war targets, doing things in the Aldrat area, such as Operation Fortress. The low-set camp tends to pick up a lot of people as well. And sometimes there's just roams that go out, either hunting war targets or just pirates or some other person. And yes, there is no 24-hour stasis if you do not have roles. But everyone in the Uni automatically receives roles within a week of joining. That would be the freshman title, and that gives you a role. So when you're picking your role for a PvP fleet, you can generally go into tackling, electronic warfare, or damage dealing as your generic 3 choices. Some other options include logistics, though that is more advanced. Tackling tends to be the easiest group to get into. It's very little on skill requirements, very low on skill requirements, rather. The tacklers make sure the enemies don't get away. The electronic warfare group is a little bit more skill intensive than tackling, but you can get into it in frigates and cruisers, so it tends to be a very effective setup. And then damage dealing is generally not a good idea for newer players because it requires a fairly high amount of skill points in either gunnery or missilery. And just because of those skill requirements, to be able to perform well, damage dealing is not a recommended type. Once you've picked your role, you can prepare your ship, you can fit it out, and make sure you follow the war stop when you're doing so. Always try to fit your ship appropriately, so if you're flying a cheap disposable frigate, don't put fancy expensive faction modules on it, even if you're allowed to. It's just generally a bad idea, because it makes you a big juicy kill, and we don't want to do that. We also have some basic fitting guides for all 4 races, and a ship replacement program that can help you replace a ship during war. We can go all the way up to cruisers. And of course, you can always get free frigates from the hangar. All you have to do is ask in Corporation Chat, or once you get the freshman title, you'll have access to it on your own. Some other things you can do to prepare are make sure your medical clone is up to date. That's something you should always do before you undock. And another thing is create a jump clone. If you want to know how to do that, we have a whole page for instructions. And there is the link in the chat. And that link is also available.
Is this the war survival thing?
Yes.
Oh, where are you?
Right here.
Like I'm at Outdoor right now, so like, are you at any
There is
game?
no practical, so you can be anywhere at all. We are using the lecture.e-uni in-game channel and this Mumble channel. That's all there is to it. You can be docked anywhere.
Alright, cool.
Alright, back to the jump clones. You can create a clone and have a whole bunch of them, and all you need is one skill called Infomorph Psychology. And once you have that, you can create up to 5 clones and store them pretty much wherever you want. All you do is create the clone, fly it somewhere, and jump out of it. The exact details are all in that page. So now is a great time to set up a clone, because then you'll have a clone with no implants in it, which allows you to fight without any problems. Because if you get potted, oh well, you didn't lose anything. And of course, you should all make sure you have Mumble set up properly for the main Uni server, not the public server. Doing that's pretty easy. You just have to have a forum account, and then you can log in. It's that simple. If you want to participate in PvP fleets, the very first thing you need to make sure is that you have your overview set up properly. Now a requirement to join the Uni, so you should all have it set up anyway. But it is a requirement that you use the Uni standard for the overview appearance. Otherwise, you won't be able to tell when a red flashy or a yellow flashy shows up. And that's usually the term we use to refer to them. Red flashies are war targets, yellow flashies are pirates. And it also may make you shoot friendly people by mistake. So always, always, always follow the Uni standard. And the Wartime Checklist has a link to the overview guide, as well as a rookie's guide to fleet ops. So you can get lots of information on how to make a fleet, how to join a fleet, and all of that really quickly. And I'm just reposting that link so you can all go down to the bottom and take a look at it if you want. And of course, we have Intel channels set up. To join the chat channel, it's liveintel.iln. Password for that can be found in-game under your Neocomms Corporation window, then Alliances, then Bulletins. And if someone ever asks for that password, you tell them just that, where to find it. Never give out the passwords for any channel, ever. Always just tell people where to find it, because then if they should be able to get it, they can get it. And then the very last thing in the checklist, always be patient. Wars can sometimes be boring because the enemies don't come out and play. Or they can be a lot of fun if you get involved with the PvP fleets. Every war is a little bit different, so just have a little patience and remember that it is just a game. Despite the internet spaceships being serious business and all, it is just a game. And should suspects and criminals be flashy color tags in the Uni standard, follow that. It will tell you exactly what to set for what should be blinking, what should not be blinking, etc. The appearance settings for the overview are completely universal. So no matter what tab you're using, it will always use the appearance settings that you picked. And looking at it, it shows that pilot at war with your corporation, pilot at war with your militia, pilot with a limited engagement on you, pilot with -5 or below security status, pilot as a criminal, and pilot as a suspect are all flashies. They are in the background colors. The only one that is flashy for its little color tag, which is the tiny picture that shows up on the left side of your overview or in local, is at war, because that's the only one you want to flash there.
I see a flashy guy in Aldrat right now on a S-Bay. Should I kill him? Should I attack him? I don't know.
What you should do if you see a flashy somewhere, first, show info on them so you can see who they are. Once you've done that, if they are a war target, use our intel channels to report what you see, such as what kind of ship they are, the name of the person, where they're at, that sort of thing. The more information you can give, the better. And currently, if you see flashy in Aldrat, you have something set up incorrectly in your overview. Because there are no flashies in Aldrat right now. It's all green or neutral. And a couple of blues. So again, make sure you go through the overview setup guide. I've linked it in lecture.e-uni. And follow it to the letter. And there's a link to the specific section on getting it all set up. And that pretty much covers it for the wartime checklist. So any questions about that?
Yeah, one question. Could you repeat the part about the chat channels where we were supposed to put intel in? I can't see one in the list that sort of sticks out. Which one was it?
It's under the Fleet Operations Reporting Intel section of the checklist, and it is liveintel.iln. To get the password for that, you have to go into your Neocomms Corporation window, then the Alliances tab, and the Bulletins sub-tab, and it will have the password fairly close to the bottom.
All right, I'll check that out. Thank you. I was looking at the Wiki's chat channel and mailing list. It's not listed there, so that's confused me.
We do not include Intel or anything related to it in public locations. The reason for that is we don't want war targets to have access to it. Now, of course, good war targets have spies in the Uni, so they'll know anyway.
Spies everywhere.
Yeah, spies in space.
I've been found out!
So that is why we do not share channel information like that publicly, and we also never say passwords. Always just tell people where to go to get the information. For live intel, it is the Alliances tab with the Bulletin subtab in the Corporation window. For other passwords, we actually have a forum thread to get that directly. And anyone who has a Uniforum account and appropriate access level can get to that forum post really easily because it's on the main page of the forum. You just scroll down a bit and there's a forum password redirect button. That's all you do. Pretty simple. Alright, with that we go on to tips for war, which is some general suggestions on what to do to not lose your ship. Because we really don't want to lose ships. That's bad. We want to make the enemies lose their ships instead. That's better. And if you go down in a giant ball of fire while taking down an enemy, great. That's what we like to see.
So is there going to be any war PvP sneaks today, or?
I have no idea. That's not what this class is for.
Alright.
If you have questions about specific fleet activity, please go to the in-game channel mess.iln. That information is in... Well, it used to be in the Alliance message of the day, but it's not right now. Strange. But it's just mess.iln, mess.iln. So the first rule of Eve, don't fly what you can't afford to lose. And you should read that again and again and again. Don't fly what you can't afford to lose, because you will lose it eventually. Don't put everything you own into a single ship, ever, because Murphy's Law will step in and blow it up for you. Don't put a bunch of expensive stuff on something that is really cheap, like, say, faction modules on a Rifter. Generally a bad idea, because you're very likely to lose that Rifter and the faction module when you could have used a Tech 1 module for pennies, relatively. Yep, and sometimes you can lose a ship without even blowing it up. Just forgetting where you put it. However, there is a wonderful button in your Neocom called the Assets button, and with that and its built-in search function, you can find almost anything as long as it's not inside a container. If it's inside a container, sorry. Yes, and you can also lose ships by having your POS taken, which some of our former war targets learned quite recently. Because the Uni is so nice, we're always educating everyone, even former war targets. So again, don't fly what you can't afford to lose, because you will lose it. And some basic precautions. If you are in an active war, make sure your ships are fit for PvP. Even if you're doing PvE stuff like missions or incursions or anything else. If you are PvP fit, you will be able to handle it when a war target suddenly shows up in your mission. If you're PvE fit, they'll probably make short work of you because they'll shoot exactly what you're not resistant to. Try to avoid using specialized mining ships, such as barges, exhumers, the Orca, the Venture. While those ships are not necessarily restricted, some of them are actually allowed. It's a bad idea to fly them because they are slow and do not have much in the way of defenses. Of all of those, though, the Venture is probably the best one to use because it has increased warp core stability, making it resistant to warp disruptors. and it's pretty quick for a mining ship anyway. Another type of ship that you should generally avoid are hauling ships. Industrials, including the Noctis, blockade runners, deep space transports, and freighters. If you need to move things during wartime, you should use an out-of-corp character. There's a link in the tips for creating an out-of-corp alt hauler. You can actually have up to 3 characters on any given EVE account, so you should take advantage of that and take it off of your main character to train up an alt to haul for you. That way you never have to haul. And some more tips: if you want to be a smart pilot, always fit your ship for PvP if you're in a war. So don't put mining lasers on it. Those don't break ships, which makes no sense to me. Asteroids are immune to regular weapons, but not mining lasers, and yet mining lasers can't hurt ships. Something's wrong. And yes, we do have lots of stuff on the for getting stuff hauled. We also have the industry.e-uni in-game channel. If you need help hauling, you can always ask there. Or, of course, you can ask in chat.e-uni. We often have people willing to move stuff. And mining lasers should be able to handle ships just fine, because they're made of titanium. And titanium is just rocks. Lots and lots of feldspar. Alright, some other things to do. Make sure you're using your guns and launchers effectively. Try to use faction ammo when you can for PvP ships. You don't need to fill your cargo. Just enough ammo to last for the expected duration of the fleet, typically 1 or 2 reloads. Laser boats frequently don't have to worry about that too much, because lasers are cheap like that. If you use Tech 1 crystals, they never wear out. And if you can fly a battle cruiser or larger, you should really try to fit a Tech 2 tank onto your ship. That will greatly increase your survivability and your ability to stay on the field and keep doing damage, or whatever else your role is. And of course, always fit your ship for your role. So putting electronic warfare on, say, a damage-dealing battleship, probably not the best idea. But fitting something to make your guns hit harder is definitely a good idea if you're a damage-dealing battleship.
Question?
Making your guns do more damage in a tackle ship, however, again, not a good idea. So fit your ship for your role. And if you've got a question, go ahead and type it out. Or say it if you don't want to type. Hitting faster or faster rate of fire is basically doing more damage, and that's what I mean by that. Doing more damage means either increasing the raw damage of the weapon or firing more bullets at the enemy. I'm always a fan of increasing both myself, when I'm flying a damage-dealing ship, anyway.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Alright, when you are at war, you should always be checking the local channel for war targets. With the university overview setup, they have a flashing red square with a white star inside it, right next to their name in local. It's fantastic. So just kind of slowly scroll through the list. You don't really need to look at the names, and just pay attention for anything flashing. And you should do this whenever you're in space, whenever you first enter a system, and if you've been in the system for a while, you should be continually rechecking the list. A little trick: if you left-click any of the names in local channel just once, and then hit Control-A, it will select the entire list. Then, if anything changes, such as someone else enters, they will not be selected, which lets you quickly get a grasp on any changes as they happen. And if you're trying that right now, you can see that when you select everything, they all turn white, so they'll just lose that white background when a new thing enters. And I actually first learned that out in nullsec. when I was living out there.
We have several requests to repeat that, please.
If you select one person in local, just left-click on them just once, and then hit Control-A. If you're on a Mac, I'm sorry, I don't know Mac keyboards at all, so whatever your select all key command is. And if you're gaming on a Mac, shame on you. But just select everyone in the local channel in the member list for local, and you will see everyone turn white. It's fantastic, because then you can quickly see changes to local. To make the box change a bit, you have to manipulate channel settings a bit to make your local do what you want. If you click on the little gear icon, you can make a whole bunch of changes to your local WIS, such as showing timestamps, turning on or off blink, and those are, of course, for all channel options. In the member list settings, you can also change it to show a compact member list. Gets rid of all the portraits, so you just see names and icons. Generally, that's the preferred way of doing it, because it makes it all so much easier to go through. Especially in places like Jita, where you have over 1,000 people in that list. So always poke around at buttons on your interface whenever you get a chance, because then you'll figure out what they do. And of course, the little A- and the big A+ are how you change your font size in those windows. And as for making it so you only see usernames and no chat box at all, that is not possible. It has never been possible. But you can move the window outside of your rendering area to effectively hide the chat part, so that you only have the user list. And of course, you can drag the center divider bar to the left to further shrink the chat box size. You can get it down pretty small. So if you are flying around for any reason and you're all alone and not in a fleet, and you enter a system and see war targets, the first thing you should do is find a station and dock up. Quickest way to do that, if you're in space, just right-click in empty space, and the drop-down menu should give you a station list. If there are no stations, look around you in your overview. If there are war targets, go to a different gate and try to jump through it. If there are no war targets, then burn back to the gate, that is, go to the gate as quickly as you're able and jump back through it, and try to find a station on the other side. But you should always dock up when you see a war target unless you are comfortable with escaping war targets. It can be difficult to do. I have lost my share of ships to war targets by not being able to get away. I lost my incursion Osprey. It was a sad day. Or not Osprey, Basilisk. Don't fly Ospreys and incursions.
Shame on you.
Yeah, it was sad. But, you know, when there's a heavy interdictor with focus warp disruption, there's not much you can do.
Oh no, I was saying shame on you for flying an Osprey in an incursion.
No, it was a Basilisk. It was worth a lot more than an Osprey.
Question.
Hmm?
Based on your skill level, engaging war targets solo, is that something that's done?
It's something that can be done if you find a war target that is alone, but you should always assume they have friends close by. And you should also assume that they have declared war on us for a reason. They usually have much more skill points than the average Uni pilot. So your chances of survival are pretty low. They typically know what they're doing if you're solo.
Copy that.
Now, once you've got more experience and more skill points, then you'll probably be able to maybe take 1 or 2 down. And it will always be fun, but you should try not to lose things unnecessarily to war targets. Because when we lose things unnecessarily, like losing industrial ships, it makes the Uni a bigger target. People want to attack us to get these kill mails that are kind of stupid. Losing an industrial to a war target is something that should never happen. But in the past month, it's happened a whole lot. That's why I'm doing this class. Another thing that has been a big problem in the past month or so has been trade hub losses. You should not go to a trade hub when we're at war, because most of the corporations and alliances that declare war on us live in trade hubs and attack unis in trade hubs. Trade hubs are JITA, Amar, not all of Amar space, just the Amar system, Dodixie, Renz, and Heck. Now, Heck is just 5 jumps away from Aldrat, and Renz is 8 jumps away. It's the only time when 2 trade hubs are actually really, really close. All the other trade hubs have fairly significant distances between them. And some things that will get you killed really quickly. Autopilot. You can use Autopilot to set a destination, and that will highlight things in your overview with a yellow icon. That can be very good for finding your way, but you should always manually fly your ship. Always click or use the dock shortcut or jump shortcut. Never use Autopilot because it warps you 15k or 10k, somewhere in there. That's 10 kilometers away from the target you're trying to go to, which gives plenty of time for any opportunistic war target to lock you up and blow you up before you can jump through or dock. So never use Autopilot. It's a bad idea when you're at war. During peacetime, Autopilot is discouraged, again because it makes you vulnerable, but not necessarily a super bad idea if you're not in anything shiny. If you're not making yourself a target by using expensive modules or carrying expensive cargo, then Autopilot is generally okay during peacetime. During war, you're always a target. If you need to buy things from a trade hub, again, best thing to do, make an alt hauler. I'll put that URL in here again. You can have up to 3 characters on your account, so make a new one and just take a couple of days off of your main character and train up an alt to do all your hauling and shopping for you. While you are in an NPC corporation, you are 100% immune to war decks, and as long as you're not, say, doing missions, you have no corporation tax to worry about. So, alts are fantastic. And another way to get yourself killed really, really quickly is going AFK in space. If you are not at your keyboard and you are in space, there's a really good chance that you will be found and someone will take advantage of the fact that you're sitting there not paying any attention, and suddenly, boom, there you go. If you must leave the computer during wartime, or at any time really, you should always try to dock up as quickly as you can. Even if you don't have time to sit through docking because it's an emergency, it takes all of 5 seconds to right-click, select a station, and dock. So try to do that if you're able to. And of course, if you don't have time, people do understand. Because again, this is a game. And if you are in a fleet, you should always be on Mumble. Because we use Mumble to communicate. And if you're not on Mumble, you're not going to have any idea what the fleet's doing. And in general, you should not be impaired on a fleet. So don't be drunk. Don't be incredibly tired. Don't be high, or any of the other things you can possibly do to make you lose concentration. Every now and then, some people have permission to run what's called a drunken roam. Those are exceptions to that general idea that you shouldn't be impaired, because that's not a rule, it's just a suggestion. And a kill mail that confuses someone. That would be a mining barge that was out mining Scordite, and a Uni member did it. So there's a lack of comment on that particular kill mail, so best thing to do, don't speculate. Managers are already well aware of it and are probably handling the situation on their own. So best thing to do, when you see weird things like that, just don't get involved. It just creates drama, and this is a game. We don't want drama.
Yeah, he's been identified as an alt of UMAD, so he's been kicked.
Yay. And yes, that happens. People who are in a corporation with you can freely shoot at you, except for NBC Corps. And no, Duke, the Warsaw does not allow for friendly termination of anyone found AFK in space. That is a very, very old part of the Warsaw that has been long removed. The only people who are allowed to do that are managers and directors. That's it. Some ILN people may also have permission. But if you do not have permission from ILN directors or other directors or managers, do not shoot friendlies in space. It's just bad. Don't do it. Even if they're AFK and totally shouldn't be flying that big shiny industrial, notify a director, notify a manager. That's the best thing to do.
There are campuses that if you're found out doing something and you're AFK, they will destroy your ship.
Yes, some of the campuses have special rules for that, but I'm talking about university in general.
They're cruel at the mining camp.
I know, they beat us. There are no cookies.
Guys, don't join. It's torture.
Alright, sorry about that little sidetrack.
Okay. So the last section of the Tips for War has a bunch of recommended activities that you can do during wartime. You can travel around. It's best to, again, haul with an out-of-corp alt. That way they're not a target. But you can generally fly around, move ships, get PvP ships set up. Doesn't take much effort. Apparently this page needs to be updated because we no longer have a POS, at least not in Aldrat. That is a player-owned starbase. We don't have one in Aldrat. Red versus Blue destroyed it a while back. But you can always set up your overview or practice scanning or even sparring somewhere near a POS if we have one, because POSes will have guns and they can shoot hostile targets that come in. And even if there aren't any war targets around, that doesn't mean there's nobody to fight. You can always join a fleet or create a fleet and head out to low-sec or even null-sec and try to fight things. Just make sure you follow our rules of engagement if you do so. You can always head into wormholes as well. Wormholes offer a variety of both PvE and PvP combat. So you can blow up a whole bunch of stuff and get a lot of ISK out of a wormhole. You can also do incursions. However, there are some more specific rules for doing incursions during wartime, so you should check out the incursions page and the incursions chat channel in-game for any questions about that. You can also run missions. It's best not to do it in, say, super shiny ships, like my Navy Scorpion. I do not fly it during wartime. I fly a Maelstrom instead. Tech 1 battleship versus faction battleship. And if you want to mine, the best thing to do is do so in a group. The more people you have active, the more likely it is you'll notice when someone sneaks into the system and tries to blow you up. Hopefully you'll notice before they get to the blowing you up part, that way you can get away. And a wonderful thing you can do is station trading. With just a few skills like marketing and procurement, you can trade remotely from Aldrat in Heck, because we're only 5 jumps away. So you can buy things, sell things, set up orders, and make it that way playing the market if you like doing that. Just remember, don't haul on a Uni character. Always use an out-of-corp alt or contract it through a courier contract instead. And of course, you can do anything you want with an out-of-corp character. Yay! Out-of-corp characters are not targets for the Uni wars, unless you really make them mad and they just really want to go after you and get Concord after them. And of course, another option is always to leave the Uni for the duration of the war. And if you do leave, you must wait a full 7 days from the time you leave before you can rejoin, unless the war ends first. And that's any war that was active when you left. So if a new war is declared, then the other one gets removed. Even if it's only been like 3 days, you can rejoin. And then there's a whole bunch of references and notes that explain a lot of those points on the tips page. And the highest sex space that people can bubble would be nullsec. Bubbles can only be used in nullsec. That's it. If the security status shows as any color other than red, you can't launch a bubble. And for those wondering, a bubble is a giant sphere of nobody inside can warp death. And if you want an example of why bubbles are dangerous, just click on that link there to my user page on the wiki. Go down to the bottom, and you'll see that I killed myself while in Razor because I bubbled myself. Along with a bunch of other people, of course. So yes, I killed myself. It was fantastic. I also killed my pod, I think. I don't remember. Alright, last page. Avoiding losses to war targets. So again, if you undock, you really should be in a fleet, even if it's just a fleet with yourself. You can do that in multiple ways. You can find yourself in any channel's list, right-click, and form a fleet with yourself. Or you can go to your Neocom and go to your fleets window. And then on the top left corner of the fleets window, there's a little section with 4 white bars that are horizontal. If you click on that, it gives you the option to form a fleet. And once you form a fleet, you should create an advertisement for that fleet. Again, you can get there through the white bars, or again, right-clicking yourself, or just going to the advertisement tab in the Fleet Finder. Your fleet should always have the details hidden, should always be open to corporation and alliance members only, and generally you want applications to require approval, that way you know when someone's joining. Because otherwise, a sneaky spy can join, warp directly to you, and blow you up. And that's not fun.
Cerulean?
Yes?
About fleets, make sure you check with your campus, if you're in one, about rules on broadcasting or not broadcasting fleets. For instance, AMC, fleet broadcasting, or advertisement is not okay.
Yeah, again, this is general Uni Rules. I am not covering anything for the campuses. If you have questions about specific campuses or specific activities, go to their relative channels and ask that. So, this is just general Uni Rules. Campuses always have more restrictions because they need to have more restrictions. So, that's all. And another good thing to do instead of creating your own fleet is joining Operation Fortress. That's a fleet we keep active in the Aldrad area. And I see a typo that I'm going to fix really quick. There we go. So you can go there to keep an eye on any war target activity. You can generally ask them if they see anyone, that sort of thing. And of course, you should always be on Mumble if you are in space ever, because you need to be able to hear if people have, say, important information to give, or if you're in a fleet or trying to get information from Operation Fortress. Best thing to do is be in Mumble, because talking is faster than typing for most people. And if you spot a war target somewhere, again, go to liveintel.iln. The instructions for how that works are in your Corporations window, Alliances tab, Bulletin subtab, and you can get all the information on how to get into Live Intel and report it there. And a couple other things. When you're about to undock, always check local first. Local tells you who's in system with you. If you see flashy red things, you probably shouldn't undock, because they're probably right outside the station waiting for you. And even if they aren't, if you choose to undock, Murphy's Law will make them suddenly be right outside the station. Because that's just how it works in Eve. Eve hates you. And we also have Live Intel, which is good for reporting information and seeing any recent reports of information. It should not be considered 100% accurate, because it's only good if the information is posted immediately and may not be completely accurate. The target may be moving or doing something. Always keep timestamps on for your chat channels so you can see when things were said. That way you know if something was posted half an hour ago instead of 2 minutes ago. And you may not like war targets. In fact, you may even hate them. But a lot of them are really good at PvP. So it may not always be possible to kill the mean war targets. Even with Operation Fortress, to consider killing a war target, you need enough people able to handle the job, enough people willing to handle the job, and someone willing to run the fleet to get them. That's a lot of work sometimes, so it doesn't always happen. And of course, just because you can engage a target doesn't mean you should. Trying to figure out how to kill an enemy is a great thing to discuss, though. So if you ever want to figure that out, go to Op Fortress and have a chat with people, see what they're doing. Because the bottom line is, we don't want to give our enemies easy kills. That's why we have the Warsaw. That's why we have the ship restrictions. We want you to know what you're doing before you fly shiny, expensive things in wartime. And we want to make wars annoying and boring for the people declaring war on us. That way they don't declare war again. And the more times they can kill an industrial, the more likely they are to declare war on us again. Some other things you can use to get information beyond local is Directional Scanner. You can just click the button and suddenly you know everything that's in the area. Big thing to look out for on Directional Scan is probes. If you see combat probes and there's a war target in local, it's a really good idea to dock up immediately because they're out to find you. Whenever you see combat probes, be paranoid. Always assume they're out for you. Because it's not paranoia if they really are out to get you. And they really are out to get you. And even if there's no war target and you suddenly see a bunch of combat probes, again, dock up. The target may actually be in the system, but just not logged in. Which means he is seconds away from suddenly appearing in local and landing on top of you. And you can press that button every few seconds to completely refresh the list, so it is fantastic. So if you have questions about directional scanning, we have a guide on how to use it. So there's a link for it. It's got all the details on how it works and what to do. And just a couple last points. If you want a PvE, that is, fight rats or other things that don't have a brain, don't generally do it in Aldrat. Near Aldrat is fine, but in Aldrat tends to make you a little bit bigger of a target because the war targets are expecting you to be in Aldrat. We have a lot of systems hidden behind Aldrat that are fairly defensible. Fredegod, Hardbako, Liebold, things like that. Those are great systems to get to go into for PvE because you have to go through Aldrat to get to those. And odds are someone will notice them and report it in live intel. Well before they get to your system. And of course you want to be in Mumble during that so you can hear if someone mentions it. Alright. That's it for the wiki pages. So any questions before I go on to a couple extra more advanced things about wartime?
During wartime, when you guys are out in the pocket and you have to warp out to a dock, don't waste the time to pull in your drones, sacrifice them. They're not worth it as much as you think they are.
Yep, drones are much more easily replaced than a ship.
I only said because I'm missioning and I just lost 10 drones so far. I've warped out without pulling them in.
Drones are just ammo that don't need to be reloaded as much, that's all. So a couple more advanced things you can do during war. If you have stations that you like to spend a lot of time at, you can create an instant undock. This is a point in space that you are able to warp to whenever you undock without having to align, because when you undock, you're already aligned. To make an instant undock, get into a fast ship, like an Interceptor or the Tech 1 tackle frigates, strap a micro warp drive onto it, and undock. Try to get yourself on a nice undock that's fairly centered on the undock directions, because they have like a 5 or 15 degree radius that they can or arc that they can undock you in, so ships don't all come out in a straight line. So try to get yourself centered on the undocking. Most of the time these undocks are horizontal with the station, so it's pretty easy to figure out what direction you should be going in. And then just fly really far away from the station. If you can get at least 150 kilometers away, you'll be able to make your instant undock point, but you should try to go farther. If you can get to, say, 500 kilometers, you will be off-grid from the station, and people that are at the station in space will not be able to see you once you warp to those points. Then, to test it, just dock back up in the station, undock, and try to warp to your bookmark that you've just created, and that's 500 kilometers away, or more. Or less, even. By doing that, you'll be able to undock and then enter warp and get away from everything at the station instantly. They won't be able to bump you because you'll be invulnerable for the first few seconds after you undock, And they won't be able to lock you because you'll enter warp just after leaving invulnerability. And of course, being in warp makes you invulnerable. Bumping is ramming someone with your ship to make them, say, lose alignment, or to get them away from something, like keeping them away from a station so they can't dock. And repeatedly bumping someone that is unable to fight back is considered harassment, and it is a bannable offense. However, if they are able to fight back, such as if they're in a carrier playing station games with you, then by all means bump them like crazy, because they can fight back. That is, if you're fighting a carrier in, say, low-sec or something. If you're in high-sec, one, they shouldn't have a carrier there, because carriers can't enter high-sec. And two, if they're in smaller ships and you're bumping them and they can't shoot back because Concorde will fight them, that's bad. Don't do that. Yes, you can bump Concorde. They don't really care. Just don't shoot Concorde. They care about that one. And yes, a lot of people do bump miners, partially to annoy them, partially to see if they're AFK. It's kind of a test to see if they're good targets for ganking, often. But repeatedly bumping the same person is the bannable offense, so don't do it. Unless they can fight back. If they can fight back, then it doesn't matter. And speaking of miners, if you're flying an industrial in wartime, one, don't do it on a Uni character. That is a fantastic way to lose it. And yes, CCP does actually ban people for things. For instance, you are not allowed to scam in any of the rookie systems. That is, any system where new characters enter the game, where the initial aura trainers are that handle your first couple of missions, or where the career agents are. Repeatedly, or even attempting just once to scam or otherwise harass people in those systems is again a bannable offense. CCP is pretty lenient on most things, but when it comes to the rookie systems or things where people have no means of retaliation, then CCP tends to ban that pretty heavily. Of course, all of this does need to be reported for someone to get banned, but still, don't do it. At least not while you're in the Uni. Once you leave the Uni, it doesn't really matter. Okay, and here is an example of how not to fly a freighter. Do not fly a freighter with any Uni character or any character in any part of Ivy for any reason, because this will happen. We were in a war with Dark Homeworld a little while ago, and we lost a freighter. One of only 10 freighter losses on the entire history of our kill board.
I think he's no longer with us, right?
What was that?
I think he's no longer with us.
Oh, he is. That character is actually an alt. Hall of Residence is for alt characters, and the owner of that character is Frud Fruster, the person who does a lot of stuff with the ILN.
Must be somebody else, though.
So yeah, mistakes happen, obviously. So everyone can make mistakes, even the top people. So it's no big deal, but it's just a good example of what not to do with a freighter. Don't undock it during war, regardless of what corporation you're with. If you're at war, don't undock it. Freighters are big, shiny targets. That's really all they are. Oh, a wonderful question. What was life like in the Uni under the old Warsaw? Were we stuck in stations, or did we lose many ships? Actually, we had a lot fewer losses because people were not allowed to fly industrials of any sort, period. So a lot of times, yes, we were stuck in stations, but there were always ways around that. You could form a fleet and actually head into a wormhole and get ISK there. That was fantastic. I've done a lot of wormhole operations as a result of the old Warsop. So no, we didn't have the up the hill with no socks, but we did not have a station spinning counter. If you spin your ship in a station a whole bunch of times, a little counter appears to tell you how many times you've gone around. We didn't have that back in the day. That was really sad. So you had to count manually, which is really hard when you're going really fast. Alright, another example of what not to do with an industrial. Don't go to a trade hub, an industrial, during war. Because again, this will happen. And you'll lose your shiny industrial ship to a war target. And that will be that.
I'm surprised the war target even went after. It's only worth 4 mil.
War targets do not scan ships. If they see that it is not able to defend itself and you're at war, they're going to blow it up. That's it. They don't care about what's in it. They don't care about what's fit to it. They don't care what the ship is. If it cannot defend itself, and it's a war target, it's free game. It's a free kill. That's all they care about. And that's why you don't fly industrials during war, because you'll lose them. Industrials are just big, giant shoot-me signs. That's all they are. During war, anyway. If you have something you need to move, use an alt, or get someone with an alt to help you. Don't put your alt in the Hall of Residence, because if you do, you'll be subject to all the Uni wars, which is kind of pointless. And of course, how to effectively use an industrial in wartime is, again, just fly it with an alt. Don't have to worry about it. Same goes for mining generally. You want to use alts to do that. It can be harder to do that with an alt because it tends to be more skill intensive. But if you're comfortable enough and willing to risk your ship, you can go out in a mining barge or even an exhumer, provided you meet all the requirements to do so in the Warsop. It's just generally a bad idea because those ships are pretty vulnerable. And the last couple of points on this whole thing. If you see a war target in local, the first thing you should do, don't panic. Panicking is probably the best way to lose a ship. So when you see a war target in local, dock up. Second, report it in live intel. If you see the target and can tell what ship they're flying and where they're at, better. That's better. But just knowing what system they're in and their name is pretty good information on its own. If you have a bunch of war targets in a system, you can just count the war targets and say that's how many there are and don't bother with names. Knowing what ship types they have, again, helps with planning if anyone wants to attack them. And the big thing to not do if you see a war target in local is panic. Don't panic. It's a bad idea. It can be kind of stressful the first few times you run into war targets, but just keep a level head and you will come through it just fine. And yes, I was serious about the spin counter. They did add that back in Inferno, I think. But the ship spin counter is awesome. That is pretty much it for everything that I had set aside for this sort of half-class thing. So any questions? Feel free to speak up and mumble if you have a question. To avoid a gate camp during war, what's the best way to do so without an alt? The best way to do so is to form a fleet and have those people help you. Another option, of course, is to use Op Fortress, that is Operation Fortress.
So when you jump to a system with a gate camp and you're cloaked, how would you get away, or what should you do?
If you jump into a system and suddenly find that you're at a gate camp, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, and you're cloaked, and yeah.
You have approximately 60 seconds of gate cloak, so take advantage of that. It gives you some time to look and see what's around you. If you have a lot of tackle ships really close to you, odds are you're probably not going to get away unless you're in a really fast ship. But even if you're in a slower ship, just take a look at, say, what's near you. Are there a bunch of tackle frigates? If so, you might be out of luck. But if all the tackle frigates, say, happen to be on the other side of the gate, and it's one of the bigger gates, then you might be able to get away in time. And of course, another thing is do not warp directly to another gate. If you're surrounded by war targets and trying to get away, never use gates. Always use the Pod Saver tab on your overview. The overview guide has all the instructions on how to set that up. And that will let you warp to a planet. Warping to planets tends to throw people off a little bit. It makes it a little harder to find you. And if you do get destroyed and you're already trying to warp, then as soon as you get destroyed, the lag kind of compensates and suddenly your pod is warping to your target planet. So when you need to get away, just hit the warp button as fast as you can, as often as you can. Of course, if you're in a ship with an afterburner or micro warp drive, another option is to get back to the gate and jump through it. That's one possible way to escape a gate camp. That's pretty much all I can think of off the top of my head. If anyone has more recommendations for what to do when you jump into a gate camp, please type it into lecture while I go on to a couple of other questions. What do I think of the war deck system as a whole? Is it just a way for aggressive corporations to bypass high-sec rules and get kills off people who can't or don't want to fight back? I think the war deck system as a whole is a requirement of EVE. There needs to be a way for people to attack others, even in high-sec. PvP is the focus of EVE. Everything in EVE is PvP, including the market, and especially the market, actually. Most cutthroat PvP ever with their .01 ISK wars. So overall, I think it is necessary, but it still has some fine-tuning that needs to be done. It is still too easy for smaller corporations to go after larger corporations. And it's still too easy for good people that are really good at PvP to lock down people that aren't very good at PvP, like combat specifically. But those are things that hopefully will eventually get fixed. They are issues that the CSM and CCP have been working on, so with any luck, we'll see some changes. I mean, they're always making little changes to the war deck system, so they've been improving it. And it's much better than the old system, though I do miss the deck shield. What is the average locking time for frigates on battleships and cruisers? Under a second. To lock up anything larger than you in a frigate takes under a second every time. Well, almost every time. Some of the strategic cruisers have pretty small signature radiuses. Or radii, whatever. Micro warp drive and cloak trick. That one is crazy. And Seamus has a wonderful video on how to do that. So go onto YouTube and search for Seamus Donahue Eve. I'll give you the name in just a second, pulling it out of my people and places list. there's the name to search for on YouTube, and you will find his Eve channel. And he has a ton of videos that explain things. One of them is the micro warp drive cloak trick. It is a very handy trick for getting away from things, generally most useful in nullsec against bubbles, but still useful outside of that, say for low-sec hauling, or just travel in general. The best way to use an instant undock, I assume that's what you're asking, is to not to right-click in space, but to use your People and Places window. If you're in People and Places and go to the Places tab inside that, you can open up your personal locations. It will highlight any bookmarks that are in your current system. I think it's green that it highlights them. And through that window, by just moving it to the right spot so you see your bookmark, you can very quickly right-click on it and warp to use your undock. That way you can take advantage of your approximately 30 seconds of invulnerability when you undock. Keep in mind that all of the timers for invulnerability don't care how quickly your computer loads it. Your timer starts as soon as you are registered to have been undocked. You may not even be visible to others when the timer starts. In fact, you usually won't be. So do be very careful about those timers. And yes, recommended distance would be 500 kilometers, at least. More is always useful. Sometimes less is good if you want to be on grid, for instance. Being able to warp 200 kilometers away from a station is a great way to see if there's anything there that's a threat before you try to dock. All right, any other questions or questions that I missed?
I'm sure it will, with the first time these people war decked us. I remember when Horse of Space first war decked us, we had a little class that they explained, why people war deck us. There's 3 reasons: for fun, to troll, or disc. What is the collective's reason? Is just for fun?
I have no idea, because I'm not in their corp. If you want to find that out, I'd suggest asking, the diplomats. We have a few of them. If you look up our diplomats on the wiki, you can find out who they are. Send one of them a message, see if they know. That's probably the best way to find out. They typically make an effort to contact every group that declares war against us to find out why. So with any luck, they'll know, but they may not be willing to share it. If I had to guess, though, I'd say it's what most people have, which is they want easy kills and see Eve University as a corporation of newbies that don't know a darn thing. Of course, they don't realize that they have people like me who've been playing Eve for 5 years.
Right.
Someone has to teach.
Of course.
Oh, they just got that kill.
Yeah, that's what I was posting. It just started. They've already tacked and tacked hard.
An Iteron. Only a 7 million loss, though.
Yeah, I want to say my 85 is fully fitted out and worth a lot more than that.
Yeah, so is mine.
Full Tech 2, babies.
Got I think my Iteron 5. Do I have it docked? No, I don't. Not in this station. But I've got Tech 1 cargo expander rigs on it, which are worth like 20 million each.
You said Tech 1s?
Yep, Tech 1. I will not put Tech 2 rigs on an industrial.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about the rigs.
Yeah, I'm talking about rigs. Those are expensive. Medium cargo optimization rigs are really expensive. I've got 3 of them on my Iteron because I want all the cargo.
Yeah, I have the Tech 1 rig. Yeah, I agree with you. Especially with the changes that are coming at the end of the month to the Iterons. I don't want to put the Tech
Yeah.
2 rigs on.
Well, Tech 2 rigs are like over 100 million for medium cargo optimizations. I mean, that's crazy. Not on a Tech 1 hull, ever. It's just a bad idea. Because eventually someone will scan you.
Yeah, because I'm sure by the time you can afford it, and B, by the time you can fit it, you should be in an Orca or something that could hold a lot more than what those rigs can give you. And if anybody's in this class, think about building an alt hauler. Orca is a pretty decent alt hauler, and it's very tank worthy.
Yes, of all the industrials, I would say the Orca is the best one for survivability. Just because it's got a lot of fitting ability. It can really fit a tank. And it's got lots of structure HP, so you put a damage control on it and a reinforced bulkhead, and you're not going down for a while.
Exactly.
You're still going down eventually if you've got war targets after you, but, you know, you'll be able to last a bit longer. Maybe some help can arrive. But for an alt hauler, generally, right now, you'd probably want to make an Amar or Galente. Those are the best options. With the upcoming changes, the Amar Industrial will have the best cargo capacity. Currently, the Galente Industrial has the best cargo capacity.
Well, with the Galantes, with the changes to the Iderons, they've become more versatile. So yeah, you could either A, have just plain freaking cargo hold, or versatility cargo hold.
Or you could go with a battle bagger and fit missile launchers on it. Yeah. Those changes are going to be fun. I can't wait. Any other questions about how to survive war? Or should I officially declare the class over? Alright, I think I will officially declare the class over.
Look at chat.
Go ahead and ask questions. Go for it. We love questions. There are no dumb questions. Only dumb war targets.
As I can say, the only dumb question is the question you don't ask.
Aha! If you have questions about live intel, ask in mess.il. That's where you go. Any discussion about live intel should always be in mess.iln. It is the most secure channel we have. As for the exact rules on how to report things in live intel, look at the message of the day for the channel. It will tell you exactly what to do and how to do it. But it has a sixth step, which is really odd because there is no 6. You need to get someone to change that to a 7.
I thought 6 was profit.
No, profit comes after question marks.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
There is no 6 is a reference to a Monty Python skit.
Right.
And you can always reload the message of the day in any chat channel you're in. Just click on the little gear, and the very first option is Reload MOTD. Click on that, and it will completely reload the entire message so you can see it again. And yes, that is exactly the purpose of the Intel channel. It is just saying information when you see it. And that's it. That's all it is. In case anyone wants to take care of it, they can, but nobody has to. And can we adjust the scale of the targeted ship's icon? I'm not sure what you mean. What do you mean by the targeted ship's icon?
When you target a ship, a little round icon pops up in the middle of your screen. You get a couple of them.
Okay. If you look really close near where that first target lock shows up, there should be a very small crosshair that shows up. If you click on that, or right-click on it rather, it will give you a bunch of options. By moving it, you can actually move where the target locks are. As far as I know, you can't change the scale of it, but you can move it to a more convenient location. And you can also change the orientation to make it, say, be vertical instead of horizontal if you want. And, of course, when you get it to where you want it, you can lock it in place so you don't accidentally move it. Does that all make sense?
Yes. We'll just explain it.
Yeah, and you guys don't want to see my chat window layout. I have windows all over. We've got local over here, and then I have a bunch of windows stacked on top of each other here, and then some more here, and more here. Yeah. Screen real estate is the most valuable commodity in Eve. And yes, you can change the scale of your entire UI if you want in your main game options. Dropping it to 90% is the smallest you can do. It will shrink everything on your UI. Window sizes, fonts, everything. And I actually do not use a second monitor for Eve right now. I only use one because I finally got one of those big 1920 resolution monitors. And I am never going back to my old, 20-something inch square monitor ever again.
Get a 32-inch TV.
I don't watch TV. TV's evil.
I didn't say watch the TV, hook your computer up to HDMI.
Well, that's what my monitor is. It's a TV.
Nice, exactly. I actually run Eve on my laptop, and then I have an HDMI cord hooked up to my TV, so I have dual screens.
Nice. Oh, here we go. How long do wars normally last? Wars last approximately 1 week per billing cycle by the normal game mechanics. Every week, the corporation that declared war has to either pay the fee to renew it, or the war ends. Wars always have a 24-hour warm-up and cool-down period. So when they start the war, it takes 24 hours before combat can start. And then when the war ends, there's 24 more hours for it before the combat actually ends.
How many corporations can you be at war at the same time? How many corporations can you be at war with at one time?
As far as I know, there is no limit to the number of wars that can be declared against or by any given corporation or alliance. And the fees for Wardeck and Alliance like Ivy, I really don't know off the top of my head. If I had to guess, I'd say it's probably 600 or 700 million, probably a little more. That's per week. Which for most PvP corporations and alliances that go after us, that's nothing. And yes, it is based on the number of members in the corporation or alliance. One thing to keep in mind with war declarations is they are always first at the alliance level. So anyone who declares war against us is declaring war against the Ivy League alliance. They cannot single out specific corporations in that alliance. It is always the entire alliance. And when another group declares war, they must also do so as an entire alliance, or they have to leave that alliance to do it as an individual corporation. If you check your notifications, you'll see that we had 2 wars declared on us recently. One was by the Marmite Collective Alliance, and then a corporation that was formerly part of the alliance. After the war was declared, the corporation left. That created a second war for just that corporation. And then there are some rules for how that all works out. But in general, you can't leave an alliance to escape a war, but you can leave the alliance before the war starts.
Yeah, generally when the corporation leaves an alliance right before the war starts in that 24-hour period, it will pop up as another war deck. They choose not to pay it. The war deck goes invalid, and they're no longer war decked.
Or they retract it.
Yeah.
They can, if an alliance leaves, or a corporation leaves an aggressor alliance, that is, the alliance that declared war, the corporation that left can choose to retract their war so that they don't have to wait for the duration of the war itself to end. They can basically end it early, but it still takes 24 hours for the fighting to stop. Any other questions about wars?
I'm done. I'm going to head back over to the main Uni mumble. I'll see you all later. Thank you for the class.
You're welcome.